Seed is zenlessonezero's newest electric attack agent, and with her banner on the horizon, there are very important questions to be answered. How do you build her? What's the best way to play her? Is she just a Soldier Zero ambi clone? And most importantly, can she compete with the other top DPS in the game? Worry not, as in today's video, we'll be going over questions like these and everything you need to know about Seed. As a reminder, this video will be made with footage from the creator beta server and things are subject to change, but if you found today's video helpful or enjoyable, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado, let's break down everything you need to know about Seed and her potential teams. Before we get into Seed's teams, let's take a moment to explain how Seed works. She's a basic attack focused agent who revolves around her special resource known as Steel Charge, and this allows her to use Seed Senior, the big robot, in order to punch and deal significant damage. Another important aspect of her kit are the buffs that she provides to herself and her ally, and between the attack, crit damage, and damage percent increases across the various parts of her skills, maintaining these buffs is incredibly important. Moving on to her gameplay, this focuses primarily on building up Steel Charge, maintaining the uptime on her buffs from herself and her Vanguard, and then using her EX special, her dodge counter, basic attacks, or the EX special of her Vanguard in order to fill her unique resource bar to then use enhanced basic attack punch. To add to all this, once the enemy is stunned or whenever appropriate, Seed will also focus on using her own and her Vanguard's ultimates to be used alongside the buffs from their third ally. However, despite all of what I just mentioned, a lot of what I'm saying is dependent on the fight and the team lineup. Now let's quickly go over how each part of Seed's kit works. For her resource, Seed builds up the special resource we previously labeled Steel Charge by either dealing damage herself or when her Vanguard spends energy on EX special attacks. In case you're curious, I will also include a chart here in order to detail exactly how much charge you gain from each attack, just in case if you want it. Once charged, some of Seed's abilities, like her held basic attack, will then summon her mech for a special multi-part strike, and this is the main selling point of Seed and how she deals damage. In regards to Seed's core passive, this is what makes her focus specifically on a dual DPS partner system. She links to the ally with the highest attack, also known as the Vanguard, and this creates a feedback loop of buffs, dealing damage, and filling Seed's unique resource meter. As a side note, you do need to make sure that said partner is an attack agent. When said partner uses her EX special attack, Seed gains Onslaught, which is a 1000 attack and 30% crit damage buff, but when Seed uses her EX special attack as well, the ally / Vanguard in turn will then gain Direct Strike with the exact same bonuses. This mutual exchange, combined with their constant resource generation, is actually what makes Seed both a strong standalone DPS and a powerful enabler for team-wide damage. As for her additional ability, when Seed is paired with another attack agent, she also affects her Vanguard by restoring 2 energy per second while on field. This effect can trigger once per second, and she also gains the added benefit of having her main abilities hit harder with a 30% damage increase and then ignoring 25% of the enemy's electric resistance. Now let's move on to her basic attack. After her 4th basic, Seed summons her mech for a charged punch that can trigger perfect block, and additionally when Seed has over 120 Steel Charge or when her resource is above the tick on her unique meter, she can immediately follow her basic attack with Falling Flower Slaughter and then Falling Flower Downfall with Falling Flower Downfall Part 2 as well. Both of these are actually the highest damage dealing abilities between all her non-ultimate skills, and since this is the main ability that Seed is aiming to use throughout combat, generating it quickly through the use of her own abilities, her EX special, or her Vanguard's EX special is incredibly important. As a quick side note, it is also worth mentioning that Seed can swap off field during the long animation of Falling Flower Downfall, and this will allow you to use the shoulder-to-shoulder technique that Zenless has recently introduced into the tutorial to avoid wasting too much time waiting for animations to finish. Regarding Seed's EX special, this is how Seed enters flight mode and fires missiles. Holding the special attack button extends the barrage while consuming energy, and like her basic attack, she does also have several parts or abilities built into this special that also function similarly in terms of consuming energy or being automatically cast. Now what's most notable within these special attacks, however, is that after consuming 60 energy in one flight, Seed will automatically unleash Falling Petal Slaughter. This will then allow you to use the Falling Flower Downfall skills, assuming you have enough resources, which again are Seed's most important abilities. For Seed's assists, they are similar to most other characters, but it is worth mentioning that her assist follow-up specifically does have pretty decent damage, relatively speaking. Seed's dodge abilities are also fairly standard, but it is worth mentioning that her dodge counter specifically generates a respectable and decent amount of Steel Charge. Some of Seed's abilities, like her assists and dodge skills, can actually be transitioned or shortcutted to the enhanced basic attack portion of Seed's basics, and this can be helpful especially if you're just trying to get a little bit of charge to then use said punch. Regarding Seed's chain attack, this is one of the slower and longer animations that we've seen from an agent, but overall, though this damage is well appreciated, the long animations can actually feel worse at times depending on the scenario or what you're trying to achieve. Now with this, though we are still very much in the earlier testing cycle for Seed, you could go further and actually calculate how valuable the added resource that she gains from a chain attack is, or you could even calculate how much damage / decibels you would gain from using other abilities in place of Seed's chain. Overall though, for the average player, though this might seem like a lot to calculate or even just excessive, the main takeaway here is that Seed's chain attack is notably more annoying or clunky to use than most other attack agents. Next, let's talk about her ultimate. When Seed's decibel rating reaches 3000, her ultimate places her into a first-person mech mode, unleashing one of the highest multiplier scaling ultimates in the game. This ability also gives Seed 60 steel charge, allowing her to progress towards her next enhanced basic attack punch sooner. Additionally, just like with her assist follow-up and dodge counter, Seed can follow this move with an enhanced basic attack / downfall if she has enough steel charge when performing this move. But now let's talk about what you'll need for her pre-farm. You'll need 3,705,000 dennies, 300 senior investigation logs, 25 basic shock chips, 75 advanced shock chips, 250 specialized shock chips, 4 basic attack seals, 30 ruler attack certification seals, 32 advanced attack seals, 5 hamster cage passes, 9 exuvia of refinement, and 60 higher dimensional datas of the mortal cleave type. Now let's talk about the tests and the teams that I experimented with. Before we dive into the team results though, let's briefly touch on the testing format. The main goal here was to evaluate all primary DPS agents with their additional abilities active, since many of them lose a decent amount of damage without them. And as usual, though I did also run some tests on teams where the DPS didn't have their additional abilities unlocked, those results were either very lackluster or had results that really did not reflect the intended gameplay or playstyle of any individual team. For non-DPS agents, on the other hand, their additional abilities were treated as slightly less important, as certain characters like Nicole, Lucy, or Sokaku still provided value even without them active. Finally though, just to be clear, all characters were tested with their best in slot signatures / W engines. S ranks were run at M0 while A ranks were run at M6, and the results here should really be taken as anecdotal. You can think of these as guidelines to indicate the general performance or feel of each team rather than use them as a perfect representation or benchmark of their maximum potential. And now a quick look at a few of the character stat lines that I'll be using to test today's teams. If you'd like to see more, feel free to join the Discord where I'll be posting the full run results and the stat lines of all characters that I used. As a reminder, the goal of these stats / builds is not to make the most OP character ever, but use builds that feel more realistic. Now, the first type of team that I want to talk about today though is Seed paired with an attack agent and a stun agent. Out of all the potential options here, teams that used Trigger as the Dazer performed noticeably better, clearing about 30 to 40% faster than other variations. Now, the strongest version here was Seed Evelyn Trigger though, which finished with a 53-second clear and outperformed other Trigger teams by around 16 to 18% in Deadly Assault. Notably though, SoldierZero Ambi also performed well and was comparable as an alternate option to Evelyn, especially when fighting against electric weak enemies. Another standout worth mentioning here is Seed Ellen Trigger. This comp had an even faster clear at 52 seconds, but when it came to Deadly Assault, it actually performed about 18% worse compared to other Trigger lineups. This is likely because Ellen-based teams can make use of her EX special to eliminate low health targets quick, but that said, this doesn't mean that the team is weak, even despite its lacking Deadly Assault performance. The last team of note in this category is Seed Hugo Lighter, and while Lighter generally doesn't perform at the same level as Trigger, this variation was still pretty decent. To add to this was clearly one of the better Lighter teams tested, with a 72-second clear. Now again, its Deadly Assault results did end up about 29 to 31% worse than Trigger teams, but they were still better by a decent margin or compared to the other stunner teams. Now let's move on to the support-based teams. To no one's surprise, Astra is by far Seed's best support option. Thanks to her buffs and strong off-field presence, she allows Seed and her sub DPS to perform amazingly and in the 35 to 40,000 range for Deadly Assault scores. With this, you'd also be correct to guess that Evelyn and SoldierZero Ambi are some of Seed's best Vanguard partners, and though the performances of said teams were definitely dependent on the element weakness of a boss, SoldierZero Ambi specifically finished the quickest among my clears with a 42-second average. To add to this, Ambi also outperformed most other Seed-based teams, even if they had Astra, by about 5 to 7% in Deadly Assaults. Now, I did specifically mention that they outperformed most, but not all teams, as Seed Evelyn Astra was another top performer in my tests. In fact, it actually outperformed Ambi in several fights, but this was more dependent again on who you chose to take Evelyn against. With this, Evelyn ended up performing about 2 to 4% better in terms terms of deadly assault scores, and on top of this, Evelyn also just very naturally pairs well with Seed. Their gameplay loops feel respectful of each other and don't often clash, and to add to this, their chain attacks both make use of the shoulder-to-shoulder swap cancel effect, which does actually allow you to avoid wasting too much time on one character's long animation skill as opposed to another. Now I should clarify here that Astra isn't the only support tested, it's just that she was so far ahead of the pack that nothing else really compared. That said, you don't need Astra for Seed to work, and other supports like Nicole, Caesar, Yuzaha, or Rina were all serviceable and still put up decent results. Now though obviously much worse, lineups like Seed, Billy, Caesar for instance actually still managed 30,000 plus score lines for deadly assault, and as someone that definitely isn't a perfect Caesar or Billy main, this was pretty surprising and also respectable given both characters' recent slump in rating and performance. Now in general though, the best DPS partner for Seed without a doubt is definitely Evelyn or Ambi. On average, teams running Seed / Evelyn or Ambi not only cleared much faster, they also yielded about 8 to 11% higher scores compared to lineups that used a different attack agent. Now I know a lot of these videos typically fixate on just the Astra, the Triggers, or the Miyabis of the world, but for solid free-to-play options, Seed Haramasa Trigger was still technically a bit more free-to-play, though also probably one of the best performers. Since Haramasa is free, he's definitely one of the more accessible picks, and technically since Trigger is coming to the banner, she does also fit as a potential option, though obviously she still is a limited. That said, alternatives to Haramasa and Trigger do include things like Billy, Anton, or Ambi, but in case you're still curious about the Haramasa version, even for someone that isn't a Haramasa master, he was still able to clear in around 53 seconds, though he was definitely still a bit worse in deadly assault, with him falling about 17% short in terms of score compared to the top Seed teams. Now if you swapped Haramasa / Trigger for Anton / Ambi, this would slow things down significantly, making it roughly 35 to even 56% worse than the best option. Now another decent free-to-play friendly option though that was still successful is Seed, Billy, and Nicole, and this managed a 56-second clear, a middle of the 20,000 score, and about a 25% worse score compared to the top Seed lineups. Now that we've broken down her abilities and how she plays though, let's talk about Seed's build. Seed's signature is by far her best choice, and it provides the high base attack of 713 since it's an S rank engine. To add to this, it does also have 24% crit rate as its main stat, and the engine's passive increases the equipper's crit rate by another 15% and grants a stacking electric damage buff whenever a basic attack or EX special attack deals damage. Each stack also increases the electric damage by 12.5% up to a maximum of 2 stacks, and both stack individually last 40 seconds and are calculated independently. Now on top of all of this, at full stacks, the wearer's basic and ultimate damage also ignore 20% of the enemy's defense, and as I'm sure you could tell from all this detail and description, Seed's signature W engine is pretty loaded value-wise. Now despite this being a pretty stacked W engine, if you're looking for some alternative W engines, Seed actually has a few. Severed Innocence is an S-rank W engine that performs very well on Seed specifically. It provides a high base attack again of 713 and also has 24% crit rate as its main stat, and regarding its passive, it increases the holder's crit damage by 30%. Upon landing a hit with a basic attack, special attack, or aftershock, the equipper also gains 1 stack of a buff. Each stack increases crit damage by an additional 10%, stacking up to 3 times, and this effect will last for 30 seconds with each stack's duration calculated separately, with it also only being triggered once per use of a skill. Now with all 3 stacks, the equipper's electric damage increases by 20%. Overall though, while Severed Innocence was still a decent option, this accounted for a near 22 to 30% gap in performance, which is pretty significant. Zanshin Herbcase is another S-rank W engine that offered a base attack of 713 and 24% crit rate, and regarding this engine's passive, it first increases crit rate by 10% and then dash attack electric damage by 40% as well. Now this W engine is clearly designed for agents who frequently use dash attacks like Haramasa, but it does still work to an extent with Seed as she is mostly paired with other stunners. That said, this does end up being worse than some other options she has access to, and for a more free-to-play friendly option, Starlight Engine or Cannon Rotor can be solid choices. The main reason for this is that the attack increases from Starlight's passive, and Cannon Rotor's crit rate can help with the building process of your Seed. But of course, outside of the Severed Innocence mentioned, using any alternatives that are leveled is fine too, especially if you have access to something like Brimstone or Heartstring Nocturne, which were both around 75% effective compared to her signature. Now let's move to her disk drive options. Seed's top choice is Dawn's Bloom, which increases basic attack damage by 15% with its 2-piece effect. For its 4-piece effect, this is where the set first adds another 20% basic attack damage at base, but following this again for attack type characters like Seed, using an EX special or ultimate provides another 20% increase to basic attack damage for 25 seconds. This provides Seed with a massive amount of basic attack damage increases with just one set alone, and given Seed's damage share being primarily basic attack focused, this set is definitely her clear best option. Now alternatively, Woodpecker Electro can work as a substitute for Dawn's Bloom if you're waiting to find the perfect set, but regarding the set's passive, it is fairly easy to activate and maintain Woodpecker's 4-piece set effect, but as previously mentioned, Dawn's Bloom is clearly designed one-for-one with Seed in mind. For her 2-piece set, it is often better to prioritize gear with better or more substat rolls over chasing the perfect set, since higher substat quality usually provides more overall value. However, in this case, since Seed lacks crit rate the same way that other agents are typically given it, Woodpecker as Seed's 2-piece set effect will definitely feel more comfortable when building her. Otherwise, sets like Branch and Blade, Hormone Punk, or any other damage providing set is fine too. Now for her main and substats, you're just looking for a crit rate, crit damage, and attack across your disk drives, but for main stats specifically, you'll end up using crit rate 4th slot, electric slot 5, and attack percent slot 6. Beyond this, the goal of your disk drive farming / building process should be just to stack as much damage / get as many usable substat rolls as possible while reaching close to or 100% crit rate. Now that we've broken down her builds, strengths, and best gear options, the final question left here is whether or not you should actually pull for Seed. With this, here are a few pros and cons to consider. For her pros, she's one of the strongest single target electric DPS agents. She has a dedicated set that works very well with her. She has decent performing alternate W engine options like with Brimstone, Evelyn, and Ambi's signatures, and she does also have a pretty great visual design for mecha lovers or I guess feat enjoyers. Now as for her cons, she is technically missing her full potential without Orpheus, and although she does offer some utility outside of it, her role if you just use her as an electric DPS can be filled by other electric agents. Now to add to this, she can take some time getting used to, as her enhanced basic attack is much less flexible in usage than others that you might expect, like with Evelyn and Miyabi. Ultimately, Seed is worth pulling for if you want a premier electric carry who offers high damage consistency and the ability to potentially buff future attack agents as a sub DPS. However, if you already have strong DPS agents built, or if you prefer playing something more anomaly focused, her value definitely drops, especially without her signature W engine. From a pull value perspective, she definitely ranks pretty high as a top priority option for players that are seeking a long-term investment in a reliable electric or attack buffing DPS. At the end of the day though, whether or not you should spend for her ultimately depends on your roster needs and playstyle, but as always, this is just my advice and the final decision is yours. In case you're curious though, I will be pulling for Seed. That wraps up today's video on Seed, however, and at the end of the day, she's just a powerhouse electric DPS that does have a few features that set her apart from most other carries in Zenless, and no, I'm not talking about her feat. Whether you should actually pull for her ultimately comes down to you, but again, that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching though guys, I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.